For this Monsters Music Monthly, I thought we'd talk about how to write a song. A lot of guitarists out there focus on guitar. There's a lot of instruction, but not a lot of people are knocking down the door to write songs. Maybe I'm wrong. But for me, I'm a singer, songwriter, guitarist, and I'm an okay guitar player, pretty good singer. But what I really pride myself on is songwriting, and I think songs are the most important part of musicians or a band's musical life. And again, I could be wrong, but that's my theory about it. So there's two different aspects of writing a song to me. There's music and lyrics. And a lot of people ask, well, what comes first, music or lyrics? I always, just for your information, I write music first. And so I'll just start with music and then we'll talk about lyrics. How about that? If you have any questions, please dig in. I usually start songs, if it doesn't occur to me in my imagination, if I don't hear something, and I'm just goofing around searching for songs, I use a program called Accordion. You can get it on your iPad or iPhone. I think just maybe your iPad. And what I like about it is it's just chords. I don't know if you can hear that. Let me turn it up. Well, I have it set so that every time I press a chord, it's just a organ. And then on here, there's all the notes of the chord. So a lot of times I'll just sort of play around with chords. And I'm in the middle of writing a song called Don't Cry Wolf. And I'll just show you how I stumbled upon it. You know, just stumbling up, working on chords. And you can get some rhythmic accompaniment if you want. And I just sort of find chords that work well together. So that's the idea with that. Again, that's called accordion. And so that kind of helps me to get a basic starting point. You know, I find chords that I like. I sort of start to formulate an idea in my mind of what a good melody is. I'll try to play those chords on a guitar, you know. And then we'll go from there. So once I get a melody going, and obviously we could talk a lot about melody and different devices and different ways of looking at melody and chords and theory and scales and all that. But once I get a basic idea for that, then the next step for me is having a lyrical concept that can be joined with that. And words are different than music. It's a different, process and a different art form. Maybe they're artificially joined, but when music and words come together artfully, it makes a powerful thing called a song. And just for your information, my favorite songwriter of all time might be Burt Bacharach. I love someone who really can combine a simple melody and a simple lyric powerfully, so that every line begs you to hear the next line. Like in Burt Bacharach's case, you know, what do you get when you fall in love? I want to know the answer to that, see? And so the lyrics and the words kind of go together in such a way that my brain is sucked in, and I have to know what the next line is. I'd seen a special on CNN recently about the incredible artist, singer Linda Ronstadt, who isn't a songwriter. She's just a singer, not just a singer. She's an extraordinarily brilliant artist / singer. And she had a statement that caught my eye about this, which is that I know I found a great song when I feel like I have to sing it. I just have to sing that song. And so that's kind of the goal here. is to get something that pops in that way. And again, it's not just music, it's not just lyrics, it's finding a way to combine them in an artful way. And so let's just say that I've gotten some basic melodic ideas that I like, some chords that I like. I've gotten kind of a melody that can make some sense. At that point, what I do is I map out my melody in syllables. So in this case, you know, it might be something like da na 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 na, and I'll map all that out in syllables before writing a word so that I know exactly what I'm shooting for as far as making these words slide nicely into the melody that I have written. So here we are at words, and Springsteen has a great sentence about this, which is, words are the hard part. And I believe that's really true. It doesn't have to be hard if you have the will and skill. And it's just a few tricks and tips that I'd like to just throw at you about writing generally. Sorry about that. I was a student, a philosophy student as a younger man, and my favorite philosopher is Arthur Schopenhauer. He has a great sentence about writing, which is that the first rule of writing is have something to say. It sounds obvious, but it cuts really deeply. I think it cuts into, before I even write a song, as a person, do I have anything to say? Is there something that I want to communicate to you, to an audience? And so I always tell people, you know, there's a lot of people that are writing out there that don't have anything to say. And a lot of times people are writing songs and they don't know exactly what they want to communicate. So this is very important, both before you write the song as a human being, and then into the song to have a focus for what you want to say, what your goal is. The second rule that I tell people about writing is know your audience. Like, who is your audience? And a lot of people, they're their own audience. So maybe their words aren't necessarily popping or reaching out. And it's really nothing more complicated than wanting to communicate to somebody, wanting to tell them something, you know, wanting to say, I love you. Now, that sounds pretty mundane and ridiculous because it's just the three words that we use over and over again. But if you gotta say it, you gotta say it. So, in a lot of ways, as a pop song artist, you're managing cliches, you're dealing with the basic elements of human experience. And so the trick, I think, is to say it fresh. Just like your wife or your husband might say, have you told me you love me today? Because that's fresh, isn't it? It might be the same words, but it's doing it in the moment and making an effort to do it and using skill and will. So that's sort of my overarching philosophy about it. And I think that can make all the difference in how a song plays, whether it gets lost or whether it really reaches somebody. A successful song can become a part of somebody's life because they identify it with it, they see themselves in it. And just one last little philosophical tidbit that I'd like to bring up here is that what a lot of our culture is about today is pleasure. And entertainment is a lot of pleasure, and that's good. We all have the need for pleasure. You could call this lowest common denominator. But really what separates great art, great culture from a culture of pleasure, is this idea of the universal. There are other ways to reach people other than pleasure. And the universal I would describe as the same thing. We all experience this. We all experience loneliness and laughter and love. And so these are the universal themes that great art is concerned to render. And I would just point to Shakespeare. If you're concerned about wanting to study this, read Shakespeare, and that will quickly get you to the types of things that I'm talking about. Okay, so enough philosophy. Now I want to talk about just the nuts and bolts. We're still involved in lyrics of how to write songs. And as I said before, one of the more important things is to have a focus. So oftentimes you need to fish around for a focus. And by that I might mean it's a word or a phrase or an idea that just has a little bit of interest to it, that just pops a little bit. So I'm going to just sort of walk you through this song that I'm working on now. I haven't finished it yet, but I sort of hinted at what I'm doing, and I'll just show you the program that I use for writing words. One of them is called Evernote, and or the Notebook in Apple. I use both of them. The reason I use those programs is because I can connect to it on any device. So if I'm in a restaurant, or if I'm on the road or doing something away from pen and paper or whatever, I have all of my ideas right here, and I can just continue working them. So that's kind of a neat tip that I've learned over the years. Rather than keep a notebook, you have something that's available at all times. So when something occurs to you, and what I do with these notebooks is I log ideas. So I might not have a song in mind, but I might have heard somebody say something that caught my ear, a phrase or a word or an idea that just is sort of interesting to me. And so I'll keep a log of those. And oftentimes when I have a great musical idea, I'll go through my log to find something that might connect. So for example, a few months ago I had a song called Train of Storms, which I'm really proud of. You should check it. Train of Storms, you're the only one my heart beats for. This kind of thing where I had this musical idea that I really liked, and 10 years ago I had this poem called Train of Storms, and it made sense to connect it, and so that was the beginning point to that song. So let's say that I've gotten my song idea, and the first thing that I'll do is I'll just make a word list. And these are words that just kind of pop in my mind, that it might be a word or idea, and I'll just initially I'll just sort of start to write them down. I don't know if you can see this. Maybe I'll put the font a little bigger, but this is a little, just for example, I had 9 lives, break that glass, don't cry wolf. But the word list can be quite extensive, and I call this ultimately, this is what's going to become what I call the graveyard, because my finished ideas are going to be at the top, and then my graveyard will work its way down. So lines that I discard that I initially like, will be pushed down, and as I refine them, they'll go up. And I color code things, and this is a little bit more, I don't quite have all of my mess here, but I color code things so that I can, if I have a rhyme scheme, and these sort of slots I was talking about that are syllable maps, basically they start out that way, then I can just think of things or lines that rhyme with them, and I'll oftentimes join them in the same color and then whittle them down. So that's what the color is all about. And just as a way of kind of organizing things, but being able to put lines together that as they strike me and understand where I intend for them to go in the song. And slowly, things kind of work themselves out. Usually, I start with a lot more wordy ideas that need to be pared down. And I discover that as I sort of start to sing through them. And it just takes a little bit of finagling. But if you're willing to stare at the blank page for a while, and if you're willing to just sort of sit and let your mind wander, or keep that mind ticking while you're doing the dishes or going through your life, and if you're vigilant about sort of writing these things down, then you just sort of slowly build this thing, like building a Lego castle maybe. Except at the end of the day, a song is really simple, and there's, maybe 3 little stanzas and a chorus. So in this case, the first thing that came to me in this song was my chorus, which is hooray, because chorus is usually the hardest thing to come by. But my chorus is this: don't cry wolf at the empty sky, don't cry wolf baby, just say goodbye. That's the chorus. And that sort of gave me a focus to work the other verses around. And it's an interesting thing in songs, because a lot of times what you have is, a chorus repeats. And so one of the tricks is to try to set up that chorus different each time, so that the chorus has one meaning after one verse. It might have a different meaning after the second verse, and it might have an altogether different meaning after the third verse. These are just some general things that are in my mind when I go for these verses. And I had this idea, break the glass and pull the alarm. It's we all know where that came from, but again, like what we're dealing with a lot of times in writing verse is the same machinery that's used for poetry. So metaphor, alliteration, assonance, onomatopoeia. Study poetry if you want to be great at writing verse. And oftentimes, if I'm looking for inspiration, I'll read poets. I'll look for poets like Billy Collins, who's a poet laureate, American poet laureate. I don't know if he still is now, but he has great poetry. There's poetry journals. Get involved in learning about poetry and the mechanics of poems, rhyme schemes, all this sort of thing. How to write a sonnet. These are good exercises that can lead you into a deeper experience, a more skilled experience of being a songwriter. So I'll just sort of read you what I got here, just because I think it's interesting, because a lot of times I feel like words should stand on their own. And I tell songwriters this, that's how important I think words are, that they should have an interest independently of the music. And not that it always works out that way, because a lot of times music can give you a clue of what's going on in the verse. A lot of times I say the words are lying and the music is telling you the truth. Sometimes it's that juxtaposition that gives the listener a great emotional release. So my words, I'll just read them to you. Break that glass, pull the alarm. Now you'll never get back to your lover's arms. Had 9 lives, but you're down to your last. Such a slow heart, sure can think fast. Free falling in slow motion. No way home and nowhere to run. Again, now I'm at my chorus. Don't cry wolf now at the empty sky. Don't cry wolf, baby. Just say goodbye. And then I got another verse that I'm written. I'll just read it to you quick. Take that dive into the deep end. Sink or swim, it's too late to pretend. Like a drug, I depended on you. Strung myself out on your rescue. Still sleepwalking underneath a spell. Indecision is like choosing hell. So those are 2 verses, and they're I think, elegantly composed. They have a rhyme scheme. They set up my chorus, and haven't yet to complete my third verse. I'm in the middle of that, but maybe next month with the whole band, we'll flesh this whole thing out, and you'll hear the big picture of where we're headed with it. All right, so now let's say that I've gotten my song written or in progress. I've got the music in progress, and I would say the next step is to make a demo. Now, a lot of times, maybe demos aren't made for songs. Maybe you got it in your mind and in a guitar or piano or whatever, and you're ready to teach it to the band. I always like to demo things. The reason I do is because that gives me a big picture of what it might sound like with the group. It also gives me a starting point to pitch the song to my band members. And so one thing that's important about making demos is not to work too hard on them and not to be lost in making this or that perfect. I still try to make it sound good because, again, I'm pitching a song. And I use a program called Logic. If you can get any kind of DAW, a digital audio workstation type program, Pro Tools is maybe the biggest one out there. There's a dozen or more other really good ones that can be got fairly inexpensively. You can demo on your iPad even these days. But again, I use Logic. And one of the reasons I use it is because I don't need to have a dongle. It'll run on my laptop so I can carry it on the road. But basically, it also has a lot of writer's tools in it. It's very good working with MIDI. And so it has a lot of virtual instruments that I can just throw up there. A lot of times I'll just start with a basic. Once I have a tempo, I'll just have just a simple 2/4 drum part. Hold on a second, let me turn this up. Just like that. I might add a hi-hat or something, and I just use that as basically a click. The next thing that I do is I'll build a bass line, and a lot of times I'll just draw it out. It's very simple again. I'm not trying to be musical about it, but once I just draw the whole thing out with bass and drum, just that simple like that. In my mind, I'm sort of playing guitar along with it, but I'm not. I want to get this sort of overall structure of the thing down. And then I'll slowly build it up. I'll add guitar, and I just will plug it in there. I'm not going for a final tone or anything like that. I just want to vibe. And once I get all of this stuff laid out, I'm still kind of getting the structure of my song, working the structure, working your bridge, the solo, any kind of musical transitions that might help to set up different sections. I try to get as much of that fleshed out as possible before I take it to a band, because the more that's there, the more detail that I can sort of throw up there, the more my band members have to work with as far as both seeing where my head's at and also that they can then go, yeah, I like this, I don't like this, let's change this or whatever. But once I get to this point where I have a basic rhythm track with guitar, bass, and drums, I might fiddle with other parts, but typically not. In Logic, there's a great program, and it's called it's a sort of a virtual drummer, and it's so cool because I don't have to do anything except for say, on a track, give me a new drummer track, And then, you know, it gives me, boom, there's the drum part. Kyle is my drummer. And you can change drummers, but basically, let's see here. I'll get rid of my click track. There's your virtual drummer, pretty good. He's playing hi-hat, and I could pick any kind of different drum parts, different drummers, just like by clicking. But the point is not to spend too much time on this, but to get it up really quickly, which we've gotten pretty far real quick, right? And then here we go, then we're at the vocals. I use this little mic, I hold it with my hand. My kids are upstairs. I put the headphones on, and let's see here. Let's get the solos off. Boom, boom, boom. And just before you guys got here, I just sang it real quick. I'm not even done singing it, but.
When you break that glass and pull the alarm, now you never get back to your lover's arms. 9 lives, now you're down to your last. Such a slow heart, sure can't think fast. Free falling in slow motion. Nowhere to go, nowhere to run. Don't cry wolf now to the empty sky. Don't cry.
There you have it.
Don't cry.
Demo 101.
Just say
One verse and half a chorus.